Hi. So today what I want to do is talk to you about crawling and indexing. Now, I know when you enter the whole world of SEO, there's so many terms and all this kind of weird, funky sounding terminology. So I just wanted to kind of help you get to grips with some of the really not basic terms, but fundamental terms that are really, really important to you finding your way to the first page of Google. So what we're going to do today is, as I say, talk about crawling and indexing. And I thought it might be a good idea to start with what crawling means. So, um, think of search engine crawlers. These are the things that do the crawling. They're sometimes called bots or spiders. And I always think of them as like worker ants or bees that are sent out by the search engines to browse the internet and basically bring back any new or updated information. Um, or another thing you can think of them is it's a grand word, kind of map makers or cartographers who are basically mapping out the kind of the ever expanding landscape of the internet. So whatever you want to think about them, map makers, bees, ants, whatever, fundamentally what they do is their job is to systematically browse the web, browse the internet, and discover and revisit website pages to map out the structure of the internet. Okay, so how does crawling work? Well, crawling basically, what happens is the search engines send out their crawlers and they build a list of the URLs on your website that's generated from their last visit. So they remember they've got a map, they've got their own map, and you help them by creating a site by creating your own sitemap. So when the crawlers visit your site, what they do is they use the links on your pages, so those internal links, to discover new pages, and they add those to the lists of pages to crawl. So it's a kind of a continuous iterative process of discovery and rediscovery, which allows the search engines to kind of keep up with with the evidence. Like it's constantly changing, so it really helps the search engines keep up to date with what's going on. So to make sure your website's really easily crawlable, you need to have a really well-structured website, super clear navigation, lots of lovely internal links to make the jobs for the crawlers so much more easy. Help them understand your website, and help them understand your content. Indexing is what happens next. So once a crawler's visited your website, the next step is to get that content indexed. And indexing is the process of analyzing and storing website pages in a huge database, which is called an index. So when someone does a search, like, whatever they're searching for, what a search engine like Google goes into their index and it provides the most relevant results. It's like a massive, massive library catalog system where every book or website is categorized and then shelved and indexed. Remember those library shelves, library indexes with the little white pieces of card. So essentially, that's what's happening. It's your website pages are put in Google's vast index, so it's ready to be pulled out when somebody asks a question. So how does the whole indexing process work? Well, as I say, the crawlers bring back their updated information, they drop it off these huge data centers, and the indexing process begins. During indexing, the search engines they assess, the page's content, the structure, and they really try and understand the page's topics and the images on the pages, the videos, and that user experience. So all of these elements go into the whole indexing process, the assessment. How well does it fit Google's criteria for quality content? The more comprehensive and relevant a page's content and its optimizations, the much better its chances are of being indexed and ranked high in search results. Now, it's important to note that not every single page that is crawled ends up being indexed by the search engines. Your pages need to be worthy of being indexed. So to have a chance of showing up in the search engine results, you don't have to just need to be crawled, you need to be indexed. You need to pass the indexing test, and you do that by optimizing your page to within an inch of its life, okay? So you need to have quality content, and it needs to be properly structured, and it needs to be optimized with the keywords, and it needs all the technical elements of that page need to be up to scratch too. Once you've achieved those kind of standards, Google will pop it into its index, and you stand a chance of being put on at the top of the ranked at the top of the search results when somebody's asking a question about what you've got to say. So let's have a look. What's the difference between crawling and indexing? So they're really closely linked, but they're part of that whole process. They're part of the same process, but they're part of the same process overall, but they are two very distinct elements of it. So crawling is the discovery phase where the search engines send out their bots to find new and updated pages. Then indexing is the next step in the process. It's the analysis and storing phase where the content of the pages is evaluated and added to the search engine's index for hopefully future retrieval. So a web page must be crawled first before it can be indexed. However, not all pages are indexed. The algorithm is used to decide whether or not that page is worthy of indexing, which all your pages will be, because you're going to be creating amazing quality content, and your website's going to be perfectly optimized for the search engines. So what does this mean for you and your SEO? Well, it means that you need to make sure that your pages are crawlable and of a standard that will pass muster by, Google's indexing police. So make sure your pages are crawlable and index worthy. You're going to have a much better chance of ranking well in the search results. So here is some tips that you can do to make sure that you pass, you get your pages. First of all, you get them crawled, and secondly, you get them indexed. So but obviously make sure your website is crawlable. Use that really lovely, clean, simple structure. Get your URLs sounding meaningful if possible, your robots text and your sitemap. Make sure those are all well organized and up to scratch. Then what you need to do is you need to make sure that your quality is indexable, it's going to be deemed worthy of being indexed. Focus on that quality and relevance and keyword optimization. Make sure you use things like your meta tags, your title tags and your meta description to improve the chances of those pages being indexed. And then, of course, use your sitemap. You really must, when you're making changes, when you're creating new content, or instead of deleting or updating stuff, make sure you resubmit your sitemap to Google Search Console. And then, this is where monitoring, going over to Google Search Console, Google Analytics, making sure your site and your site's performing properly, and if not, get it fixed up. If your site's not working properly, if it's not effective and efficient, it's going to be very difficult for the bots to crawl. So get all those broken links and redirects and all that kind of stuff fixed up, and make sure you give the bots and your users a really good experience. And then keep your content fresh. That's another thing. Encourage people to come back, or encourage the bots to come back. If you're keeping your content fresh and you're issuing new stuff for them to find, they're more likely to come crawling through your website's doors. And then another thing you can do is to optimize your site's load speed. So make sure that your site's entirely mobile responsive. These really impact crawling efficiency and therefore indexing quality. Okay, so that's crawling and indexing. I really hope you can see how important these two elements are for helping you get to show up properly on the search results. If your site isn't set up properly so it can be crawled easily, the bots just won't have anything to take back to Google HQ with them, or Search Engine HQ. And if there's nothing to index, there's nothing to show in the search results. So, and remember, even if your pages are being crawled and taken back to the data centers for indexing, you still need to make sure that those pages are index worthy, or they're still not going to show up in the search engines. So crawling and indexing are the absolutely fundamental elements of you getting your website to show up in the search engines. So please make sure that you are taking those actions. And if you want to see them listed out, then there's a link to my blog that you can have a read and just kind of almost use the tips that I've given you as a checklist. And as always, drop me a comment, or if you've got any questions, leave a message and I'll get back to you. All right, I'll see you later. Bye.